Well, good morning. Good morning. Great to be here with you. My name is Matt. I'd just like to welcome you if you're a guest with us. I know we have some college students among us. The first time, we just want to say it's wonderful to have you. I know some of you might be wondering what's up with the stage. Well, basically, Josh forgot to pay his rent. I got kicked out again. We let him just kind of stay here, and he had to do his laundry. So, just kidding. That's not actually Josh's room. So this stage, I wanted to explain, we're in a series called The Calling, what God expects, or what God has in mind for our life. And we're thinking about God's will for us, God's calling upon our lives. And you can see there's this signpost here that kind of looks a little bit confusing. Which way is God's will? And so many of us are maybe at crossroads where we just feel some sense of tension of where is God calling us. And kind of a premise of our series is we're saying that God is at work at all places of the world. Wherever you are, God is at work in you right there, and he'll be with you wherever you go. And so we're having a series of testimonies, just people in our congregation, a whole mix of people are going to be sharing their testimonies. And what we're doing is we're having right here on the stage something that represents their life. And it might be someone's office, it might be someone's home, or just someone's place of business, anything that represents who they are, and just kind of gives us a window into their world. And what we're doing is we're kind of bringing a space that might seem like it's not sacred. That's just kind of the regular life. That's the secular life. That's just me out there. We're bringing it into this space, and we're declaring that God is at work there in that place. And so the candle that you'll see in each of the different sets represents, hey, God in work at that person, his light shining through that person in the place where they are. And you can see these flowers here are symbolic of the way that God wants us to flourish and is bringing about flourishing of people around us as he seeks to pour out life and health and vitality and hope through us in those places. This morning we have actually a missionary, one of our missionaries who's here, who lives in the city of Calcutta. We say Calcutta a lot of times because we're saying it wrong. But I want to welcome up Cheri Quesenberry. Some of you know, it's great to have you. Cheri is someone she studied community development here at UC Davis. She worked on InterVarsity staff for a while, and then in her sense of following Christ, he led her to live in I'll let her tell you where she lives. But you might think, that sounds like some spectacular calling that's so different, but you'll hear that just the way that she's just living just kind of a normal, everyday life in the environment where she is, seeking to follow Christ. So Cheri, we don't get to have you that often since you moved around the world, but we're just delighted every time you come back. So share with us, how are you following Christ in your life?
Thanks, Matt. Good morning, everyone. It's good to see you. I can't really see you that closely, but you can come talk to me afterwards. So the last couple years, I have been part of a team living in Calcutta, well said, Matt, India. And the team that I'm a part of is part of a group called Servants to Asia's Urban Poor. And our tagline, if you will, within Servants is that we want to see lives and communities transformed by the hope and power of Jesus Christ. And the way that we want to do that, or the way that we seek to be involved in doing that, is through moving into slum and urban poor communities, and then develop relationships, experience life among the poor and people who have been marginalized. And then out of the context of those relationships, we'll be involved in various projects that will hopefully help better their lives and better the communities. And actually last year, your Gifts from the Heart donation, actually part of that went to support a clean burning stove project that one of my teammates started. So there are about 300 families now in Calcutta that have access to clean burning stoves, in part thanks to your donation. So I just want to personally thank you for that. So I moved overseas about 3 years ago, and I wanted to change the world, or I wanted to be a part of what God was doing to change the world. And I believe that God's heart beats and breaks for the poor. And we see that time and time in the way that Jesus interacted with people who had been marginalized, with people who were sick, with women, with people who were sort of outcasts. And I believe that God also invites us to align ourselves as well with the poor and to walk alongside them. And so that took me in my journey to Calcutta. And so this is sort of a recreation of my room. It's much tidier than it would normally be, actually. But this might actually be a little bit bigger than my room. But yeah, sort of representative of my life there. And so basically what my days consist of is just experiencing life with my neighbors. I share a tap with 15 other families, so I take my buckets out, and the water only comes on 3 times a day, so I get a lot of time standing in line to fill up my bucket. I go to weddings, I go to funerals, I go to the market, I sit and watch people cook, and then I eat the food that they give me, and it's always pretty good. And as I've been able to do that, I've received a gift. And that gift has been acknowledging that I'm not the one that is bringing Jesus to them. Jesus is already present among them. And I experience God's Spirit among them in the way that they love and have extended friendship and care to me. And but the reality is there are hard things too. It's not all fun. There are some very real hard things that they face. And sometimes I don't have answers. When I left, I thought I had good answers. I thought I had good understandings of what development theory looked like and things like that. But sometimes I don't have answers. And I realized that the gift that what I can do for them is simply sit and listen to them, listen to their hopes, listen to their dreams, listen to their aches, and listen to their pains, and then ask God. Sometimes I can't even pray for them. I don't know how to. But I can ask God by sitting in silence with them and ask God to come alongside them and show God's self-present to them. And so that has been a gift for me. And I think that is what my journey has been about, of learning what it means to follow Jesus, is to let our lives intersect with others, let ourselves be changed by them and the work that God is doing in us through them, and that then we have the invitation to be faithful and to continue walking with them and see what God is going to do. Thank you.
It's a little bit risky to bring a missionary up on stage. First of all, her stories are far more interesting than mine, coming from such an exotic place. And much more dangerous than that is the fact that we may listen to that story, put her on a bit of a pedestal because she's making all of these sacrifices in living out her faith, admire her from a distance, and walk away absolutely unchanged, with nothing that strikes us as relevant for our own lives. It was said of Mother Teresa of Calcutta that she was the most admired person in the world and probably the least emulated. And that would leave us empty. It really would. We have been talking about the calling to follow Jesus. That's kind of where the whole sense of call begins. And today we're going to focus on the inevitable outcome of that. If you are following Jesus, you will be transformed. And I want to ask you to turn to Romans chapter 12. It's going to show up on the screen. And we're going to read that because it describes what happens when you go on that journey, when you make that commitment, when you align yourself or want to align yourself with God's will according to Jesus. Therefore, I urge you, my brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your whole self, body, soul, and spirit, as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your reasonable act of worship. It doesn't always seem reasonable, but that's what the claim is. It's reasonable to do this. This is what worship really is. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will. That is a very dense package of powerful, life-changing, even transformational truth. Now, we don't get started on this journey, and we certainly don't experience anything like transformation until we get that first part right. I appeal to you, I urge you, therefore, my brothers and sisters, Strong appeal here, personal appeal here. In view of God's mercy. Now, a huge command is going to follow, but that command has no force and will do nothing for you. In fact, you'll find yourself running from it as fast as you can unless God's mercy begins to grip you. Well, what is that mercy? You go back a few chapters in the book of Romans and you'll read these words. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall trouble or hardship or persecution or famine or nakedness or danger or sword? No. In all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. If you're convinced of that, if you get God's love, now he has your heart. That love claims you. And now you're ready to listen. You're now ready to receive. You're receptive to whatever it is God is asking of you. If someone loves you like this, and we're very skeptical about anybody's claim to love us, to care about us, to be committed to us. But if you're convinced of this, and God has spared no expense to convince us, to prove his love, and his love is a special species of mercy because this is a love you can't earn. You don't have to deserve. You don't prove yourself to get it. It's a gift that God gives you. It's a decision he has made for you. That's the kind of love we're talking about. It's a merciful kind of love. It's not reciprocal in the sense that there's some kind of exchange here. I'm giving him something he needs and he's providing something that I need. It's a top-down love. It's from fullness to your emptiness. God finds you when you've got nothing to offer him, when you're not paying any attention to him, you're running away and you're in a direction that's completely opposite of what he wants, and he decides to love you. That's the kind of love we're talking about. And it keeps coming on strong. In fact, the more you need it, the farther away you are, the more lost you feel, the greater the love, the greater the impact of this love. Again and again, the stories of Jesus that he tells, the way he treats people, the way he shows and demonstrates this love makes it obvious. So, the appeal is on the basis of the mercy of God. If you go back just a few verses before chapter 12 in Romans, the end of chapter 11, in the letter that Paul writes to the Romans, you read this. For God has bound all of us, men and women, over to disobedience. In other words, we're all in this desperate place. Whether we're Jews or Gentiles, whether we're believers or unbelievers, whether we are good people or not so good people, whether we are godly, consider ourselves godly, or irreverent, whether we're pagan or whether we're religious, we are all in a place of great need. He has bound us all over to disobedience so that he may have mercy on them all. This is God's grand plan, to reduce us, to eliminate all the excuses, to bridge the distance between us and him. And he is the one who has taken the initiative to come our way, since we can't go his way. Since we can't achieve perfection, holiness, and become that person, devoid of flaws. We can't do that by ourselves. He, in fact, is the one who has come that distance. And he has shown us this quality that whenever we see it in this world, we love it. Don't you love it when you see somebody acting in a kind way, in a merciful way, acting out of grace towards someone who isn't expecting it, who probably doesn't deserve it, who has a hard time even believing it's for them? When you get that, you're stunned like Paul is. He goes on to say, the depth of the riches of the wisdom and knowledge of God, how unsearchable his judgments and his paths beyond tracing out. For from him and through him and to him are all things. To him be the glory forever. Amen. Paul ends in this doxology, this outburst of praise. And Paul is undone and all his defenses are down. How about you? Have you experienced that kind of love? And when you have, it is only reasonable to respond with a lifetime of submission, a lifetime of faith that begins very, very small, perhaps very weak, hardly there at all, and then grows, and you fall in love. And when you're in love, when someone has won your heart, your resistance is gone. It's gone. When someone wants to serve you, when someone cares for you that much, when they prove that you matter to them at this level, however skeptical you are, however cynical you've become, that kind of love has the power to transform your life and change your allegiance and alter the basic direction that you are taking. And that's what's going on here. That's what happens when you begin to follow, because inevitably, when you start to follow, there is a transformation that takes place. You don't have to try to make it happen. It doesn't say transform yourself. It says be transformed. And that transformation is a renewal of your mind, a whole new way of thinking, a whole new perspective. Now, what are we called to do? Well, nothing much. Just give your whole self to Him. Present your bodies. I mean, I'm only present my spirit. That's a part of me. I'll give you my religious, dimension. I'll give you an hour a week. No, you don't understand. This is a love affair beyond anything you've ever experienced. This is a new life. This is a new beginning. This is a relationship that is all-consuming. It's comprehensive. Okay, that's a bit terrifying. I'm giving up some control. First of all, I have to believe that I'm loved like this. Do you know how hard it is to convince me that I'm being loved like this? Because I'm not sure that I'm all that lovable. Even though I hope and wish I am, I know inside that I'm not. But someone loves me like this and won't let me go, loves me unconditionally like this and holds on to me and continues to forgive me and continues to take me as I am, halting and stumbling as I go. Yes, that's this kind of love. You'll never experience it any other place from any other person. It comes directly from God. We see it lived out in Jesus, and He's the one who issues the call. Present your bodies a living sacrifice. Well, as it turns out, you're sacrificing yourself, which sounds like you're losing something, and in fact you're losing your old self. You're losing the ruined part of you. You're coming alive. You're no longer dead. You're no longer detached from God. You're no longer afraid of the future. You're no longer overcome by guilt and shame. It's all new. And what does that look like? The apostle gives us some details here. And of course, the whole New Testament unpacks this. The first thing that happens is we need to detox our souls. There is a value system that has deceived us. It's the pattern of this world. Paul says, do not conform any longer. Any longer implies that we tend to do it. We tend to do it for a long time, and it's hard for us to switch allegiances. But you must give up that. There must be a defiant faith now that gets engaged here. And you are no longer conformed to this world. Okay, let me get a little more specific here. What does that look like? What is the pattern of this world? Well, first of all, there's instincts inside of me that aren't exactly right, that take me in the wrong direction. But they're reinforced by a value system in the world, whether it's popular culture or popular media or other voices that come at me that take me in that direction if I just drift, if I'm not thoughtful about it, if I don't have this sort of new perspective. So, for example, there's the notion of entitlement. Wow. And I'm insecure enough that I fall for that. Because I want to make sure that I get what I need. And what I need is no longer, it's now defined by somebody else who's telling me what I need. I didn't know I needed it until they told me I needed it. And I can't be beautiful unless I have this product. And I can't be acceptable unless I have and project this image. And unless I get their product, I can't create that image. And on it goes. And I'm bombarded with this, and you're bombarded with this message all the time. And some of them just go right over us because we can see it for the fraud that it is. And others get to us. They're really seductive. They're really tempting. They really grab a hold of you. Entitlement. And you look at this living room right here. Well, that's not a living room. It's actually her whole house. She sleeps in the same room that she cooks. And you and I can't imagine doing that. She has to go outside to find, the restroom. That's a different world. We don't think we could live like that. From her point of view, because Cheri has shared this, that's not a sacrifice, because she has experienced the love of God in that setting and among those neighbors. And so giving that up may actually put her ahead of the rest of us, because we have a list of demands about how life has to work for me to survive. And it's defined by the culture around us. We're not listening to the voice of the one who made us, who knows what we need, our daily bread certainly, if not our daily caviar. And he's going to provide for us. He promises to do that. We can trust him with that. We don't need all of that. We shouldn't be consumed by all of that, because he has a whole life for us. He has a mission for us. He has relationships for us. And all of this entitlement actually ruins our relationships. It creates rivalries. It creates a kind of zero-sum game where somebody has to win somebody has to lose because somebody else, needs to win, namely me. It forces me to think a lot about myself all the time. I think there's another message out there, and we hear it a lot, and it sounds right, so we believe it, and we conform ourselves to it, and we think it works, and that is the phrase, follow your heart. I even heard it in a Disney movie, so I know it's true. Follow your heart. Well, that all depends on the condition of your heart. If your heart is corrupt, if your heart has shadows in it, if your heart is wounded and it's bleeding, you follow those instincts and what it craves and how desperate it's become, you're going to fall into deep trouble. Follow your heart if it's already aligned with the heart of God. Otherwise, be very careful, be very cautious. Challenge your heart. Let your heart be reshaped by the heart of God, by your relationship with Jesus, the one that you're following. Follow your heart can mean follow your hormones. It can mean that very quickly. And we get that message all the time. If you feel like you have to do it, well, then you must do it. And we would never deny our appetites, ever. That would be wrong. That would be, in the secular sense, a sin. To deny yourself something that you want, that you crave, that you must have. Follow your heart. If you can justify it in that way, you can justify virtually anything that you want to do. The need for recognition. This might be a particular problem here in our area where we accomplish a lot and get lots of recognition. The problem is other people do too, so they crowd our stage. I was teaching college in New England. It was my first year teaching. I actually got to create a new major at this small liberal arts college. And I taught there for the year, taught 6 core courses. And at the end of the year, they had an awards convocation. And the last event in the events convocation was the Teacher of the Year award. You kind of see where all this is going? Now, this is my first year. I'm a rookie. I don't really know how to teach yet. I mean, I'm excited about it. I love the challenge, and I'm learning. There are teachers who have been there for years. Some of them are legends on campus. So Teacher of the Year, I'm kind of sitting in the second or third row with the rest of the faculty, and all the students are, behind us and around. And the student who is giving the award is a senior and actually is in 2 of my classes. So she begins to talk about him. Okay, well, it's a him. And someone who is very articulate, lots of insight in the class, and spends a lot of time with the students outside the class informally, which I love to do, by the way. And how much this teacher is appreciated by the students for so many reasons. And finally, and I'm starting to think, is it possible that these folks recognize how good I am already? Am I better than I think I am? Are they going to give me this award? And finally she says, and the amazing thing is, he's done it in his first year. Wow. And I really wish I could stop telling this story right now, because here's what happened. The finale was, she said, and I'm delighted to give this award today to Dr. Robert Crabtree. That wasn't my name then, by the way. And I'd forgotten all about him. And I think in my mind I had already levitated to stand up and receive the award. I'd already begun to practice my very humble acceptance speech. I was so glad I didn't stand. I mean, I could have easily stood. How could I possibly ever have explained that or lived that down? Why am I so desperate for validation? Why are you? And the fact that you've had some doesn't do you any good today. You need a whole bunch more today. You need a heavy dose of it today to reassure your insecure self that you're all that you're worth something, that somebody's paying attention to you, that your effort matters. When you're following Jesus, all of that begins to fade away. It drops away. He validates you. You're his beloved. He's called you. You belong to him. You're on a mission. You're playing an indispensable role on his mission. And by the way, you're now much more concerned about other people around you and how they are doing, because your needs are being met, and he will never let you go. And there's so many other patterns out there that we dare not conform ourselves to any longer, like self-justification. How sick I am of hearing that from people who won't take responsibility, who won't be accountable, who are always blaming other people, who can't admit they did something wrong or they could do it better. Why not tell the truth? Why not be open about the fact that I'm part of the problem? God help me. And I'll let you figure out whether you're part of the problem too, and together we'll move forward and we'll solve it. How many problems in the world, how many marriages could be saved? By the way, I hope you're planning to come to the marriage conference that we're doing if you're married, because we need all the help that we can get. And to humbly admit that I need that help. The instinct for revenge that's been unleashed in our world. And we're not allowed to go there. We can't do that. So, there's a do not conform any longer, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So what's that journey like? Let me tell you where it begins. That journey begins, like so many journeys that are about change, begins in denial. I don't need this. I mean, it might be nice, and it might be nice for you. Maybe I could get something from it, but I don't really need this. I don't need transformation, thank you. I'm doing all right by myself. I'm doing all right for myself. Really? And Dr. Phil says, how's that working for you? I'm in denial. And we all know that human instinct to be in denial. And then we move from there to resistance. Okay, I said I don't need it. What I really mean is I don't want it. Now that I understand what it is, and the implied insult that I need that much help, or the terror that I feel when I think about changing direction, or you're telling me to let go of this relationship that's not good, that's not healthy, I've got to change that. I can't imagine living without this relationship. I have to have it. Or you're telling me that I have to now change my behavior in this area. I've tried before. I can't do it. I'm terrified. So I don't want it. And so I resist it. Actually, your discipleship has already begun. Because when you're resisting, you're engaged. Watch out. When you're in the argument, when you're listening and countering, you're now in the scope of the grace of God who's calling on you. And then the journey continues, hopefully, into openness. Okay, I'll consider it. I'm not sure I believe it. I'm not sure it can work, but I'll consider it. Okay, now you're at the edge. You put your toe in the water. Now you're open. You're in a neutral place, but you're no longer walking away from. You're no longer preventing the message from consideration. And then I'll engage. I'll try it. I'll make a commitment to try it in this one way, in this one place, for this one time. And that's really all Jesus is asking of his disciples. Follow me today. Follow me. Take the next step. You take one half step in his direction, he'll be there. And he'll show you the step after that. You don't have to know the whole plan. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to be ready for everything that's coming. Just take that one step. Just follow him right now. That's how the journey happens. And then ultimately that obedience, even if it's just one step, will turn into enthusiasm. Because you'll find out it's so much more than you knew. There's so much more to it than you can imagine. So that's the journey. I wonder where you are on that journey. You get to be wherever you are. I hope you don't get stuck until you get to that place where you say, I love this. This isn't something I'm just doing because I have to do it or I should do it. I love this. I love what's happening. I love these people that I'm meeting. I love the opportunity to go with Jesus into places I never dreamed that I would go. And what's the substance of the changes that happen? Well, they should be rather obvious, but consider the passage itself. If we're following someone who's full of mercy, you're going to become full of mercy. You don't know me very well. That's not going to happen. It will happen. As you realize how much you need his love, you will begin to share it with people and stop judging them and be generous in your attitude toward them and be full of grace. That will happen. Not because you try to create or generate that yourself, because you can't do it, but because you're following him and he's rubbing off on you. He's influencing you. You're becoming like him. You like the results you see. And as you're with him, you do become like him. That kind of graciousness. You begin to trust God. That's a result. That's a transformation. It was hard for you to trust anybody. Now you're beginning to trust God because you find out he's eminently trustworthy. You become, as the New Testament says, completely humble. Now, I am rarely accused of being humble. I have a big, huge, pulsating ego. But as I become humble, I was going to ask you to raise your hand. Those of you that are humble, raise your hand. And anybody who raises their hand is wrong. And then you've got a problem with self-deception and delusion as well as a lack of humility, because the more humble you become, the more you realize you have to grow to get to where you want to be, because your eyes are now being opened to how self-centered you tend to be. But there are moments when I actually lose my self-consciousness and I'm thinking about what's going on with the people around me. And that's really what humility is. It's the ability, it's the freedom to let myself go, to give myself up, because there's somebody taking care of me. I'm secure with him, so now I can release all of those expectations of myself and of you, and let go of the resentment and the envy and all those things, and live in a new kind of freedom, which really is what humility is all about. And I can honestly speak the truth about myself and about my shortcomings. That's what humility is about. So as I do that, I grow in that area. As I follow him one step, and I'm a reluctant disciple, believe me. I'm a reluctant disciple. It feels like hard work, and then sometimes, like this morning, the wind is blowing, and you can hardly resist it. You get blown away, and you keep moving. You also develop an empathy for people that you didn't have, a sensitivity to the people around you, just like the one you're following. And you care in ways that surprise you. You didn't know you did. And you begin to bleed in ways you couldn't before because you were encased. And finally, you learn to love people that are hard to love. Is there anybody in your life that is hard to love? Shut up. There is. Even the person sitting next to you is sometimes hard to love. Okay, now I'm getting some agreement. Okay. You begin to love people that are hard to love. Instead of calculating, you begin to express an uncalculating love. I love you right where you are. I love you unconditionally. And I'm loving you because I believe this love has the power to change the thing that's not good going on in your life right now. And I'm going to risk everything based on that investment of God's love through me in your life. There's some pain in this transformation process, as you can imagine. Is there pain in surgery? Sometimes God does surgery without anesthesia. I don't get that. You look at the life of Joseph in the Old Testament. Remember Joseph, who was sold into slavery by his brothers? You know why they sold him into slavery? Because he was a pain in the neck. He was a prima donna. He was a diva. He was a spoiled child. He was the one flaunting the many-colored coat that his father had given him. His father obviously favored him. He was the choice son. The rest of them were sort of, useful. And so they sold him into slavery. And he did actually pretty well as a slave. But then he was falsely accused and thrown into prison. I don't want to follow you, God, if I end up as a slave, if I end up in prison. I don't believe in this anymore. Joseph kept believing. There was a defiant faith. He kept following the lead of his God. And in prison, God is at work in his life. You see, God isn't stopped depending on your circumstances, your environment, not at all. He is a man of God in that prison. And finally, all of this, as it turns out, is preparation for God's destiny, for God's plan for this man. And he is able to literally save a big portion of the world during a time of great famine, as Joseph is appointed governor because he has developed character, because he has been transformed from that little boy who used to run around flaunting his privilege. No longer. He is truly a person submitted to the rule of God in his life, and he's free. And the impact of his life is incredible. Yes, it's hard. Okay, so how do you expose yourself to this kind of transformation? Well, you hear about it like we're doing this morning. You hear a message, and it's a concept. Sounds good. It's a concept. Probably that's not enough. You have to see it. You watch Cheri, you listen to Cheri, and you begin to think, wow, look what's happened to her in her life, and look how God is using her, and look at how happy she seems to be in doing what she does, even though she lives here. So you have to see it. You have to connect with people who are following Christ. As Paul says, follow me as I follow Christ. As we are influenced by people around us, as we purposefully focus on some folks who have something to offer, we begin to see it. Now the concept becomes an impression, a sensory impression. And then we taste it. Okay, we taste it. We have an experience ourselves. We dare to, go across the street and talk to the neighbor that's a recluse, or who barks at us, or who says nothing at all, or the one who's never returned our lawnmower. That was 3 years ago. And we go not to demand the lawnmower, but to say, anything else you need? Can't you just imagine Jesus doing that? I know you have my lawnmower. Is there anything else you need? Talk about tormenting your neighbor. He can't figure that one out. Join a small group, and you're a person who kind of isolates yourself. And I got to open up in front of other people. Wow, the best thing in the world for you. Volunteer with a ministry in town. Something going on out there. Something happening right here. Something with kids. Something with the poor. Put yourself out there. Jesus is constantly calling us to do that. That sounds like his pattern, doesn't it? Go on a short-term mission trip. Go somewhere around the world and let yourself be enveloped in the grand purpose of God in a way you didn't know, because it never makes the headlines. Taste it. Experience it. And then embrace it. Say, this is what I want my life to be. I want this to define I want this all the time. This isn't adding a little bit of God to my life. I'm all in. Embrace it. And then ultimately you're going to share it. You have to share it. You have to tell other people about your experience, because it's good, and they'll get a taste from you. And then what happens? Well, you discover God's will becomes clear to you. All the while, as you're following him, you say, well, this is what I'm made for. I'm supposed to be doing this. I've been holding back, I've been hiding, and now I'm just letting him set the pace and take the lead. And sometimes I feel a little embarrassed, sometimes it's painful, sometimes I'm uncertain about where I'm going. But I love this. This is what life is supposed to be. The other night I was watching the new film out, The Judge, with Duvall and Robert Downey Jr. You know those guys? Love those guys. I'm sure they have a lot to teach us about following Christ. And in the movie, it's a great father-son movie. I recommend it. Very powerful. About the discord between father and son. And it's pretty intense. And they're great actors. And at the very end, Duvall, playing the role of the father, has cancer. And his son says, Downey says to him, Dad, have you thought about what's coming? And he said, do you mean, do I believe in God? And his son said, yeah. And he said, well, of course I believe in God. I'm old and I have stage 4 cancer. Of course I do. Is that all this is? An end of life reprieve? Something you think about when there's an emergency? Are you missing the fact that God wants to be involved in your everyday life right now? And in the film, it was all kind of brushed aside. It's relegated to that moment at the very end. Of course, it is for that moment, but it's for little children who are invited into the arms of Jesus. It's for, young fishermen who are just at the beginning of their careers, of their lives, and they're invited on this great adventure. This is what it's all about. This is life as it was meant to be lived. This is your life. This could be your life. And if you take that next step, transformation is already beginning. The thing you're afraid of and the thing you want the most. Let's pray. God, thank you for your word. But more than your word, for your presence, for your call, and for the power to transform us. And I pray for our willingness to go on this journey, to expose ourselves to your influence, to live out Romans chapter 12 and all that follows in the rest of the chapter as love breaks out. And we learn to care for each other, and we even love our enemies, feeding the hungry and supplying those who are thirsty, even when they're not our kind. Oh God, this is a totally different way of viewing this world. And we have to step out of this world to come back into it. Lord, as we listen to you and follow you and continue, Lord, to experience your amazing grace, your wonderful mercy, your great love. In Jesus' name, amen.